Welcome back to another episode of the Entrepreneurial Family Man Podcast. Where's the fourth guy?
If I had to guess, he's probably at the baseball store by now because his son is making all the decisions for the family.
Again, Slingerland.
Yeah, they're Buffalo bound, coming back home to where it all started for the Slingerlands. Hope to run into that guy the next couple of days.
That'll be cool. Yeah, when Jamie, we're just joking with you, but yeah, you had one of your little guys that was touch and go on whether you're going to stay there if they kept on winning, or God forbid they lose and you have to hightail it out of Dodge. We are the three. I am Chris Niemeyer here with my good friends Michael McGreevy, Chris McCluskey. Jamie, we miss you, but we know you're going to have a great time up in Buffalo here, so safe travels, my friend. We are just guys who are crazy about our wives. We love our kids, and we want to kill it in business. Boom! This is just another episode where we get to tackle these important domains in our lives as EFM guys. And today we want to address this topic of, are you ready to launch? If you were to seek a new endeavor, what are the steps you need to take to ensure that goes well? Chris, I want to turn it to you first and just address this topic. Why is it important? Why do we need to spend some time exploring this idea of launching well?
Yeah, it's definitely an important topic, isn't it? But launching is one of those things that probably every single guy who would tune into a podcast like this on entrepreneurism is in at least one camp, and that is they don't have any shortage of ideas. Things that they think they could do, that they'd love to do, that they'd like to try. You know, just entrepreneurism, if that spark is in you, there's usually no shortage of ideas. And, we could do this. And every time they're out on a date with their wife, they're bouncing around some new idea for something. So ideas, options, possibilities, there's endless numbers out there. But so frequently what happens is that for the most part, we'll kind of play around with them and never really do anything. But once in a while, we decide to do so, and we can easily jump before we're anywhere close to really ready to jump. Like I've used about myself, going off half-cocked, it's just not thought through enough. So we don't want paralysis by analysis, but we don't want jumping in without even testing the waters either. And so preparing for today, I was thinking about Michael Gerber, the E-Myth, right? Looking at the entrepreneurial myths, and he says, right up front, when you look at the majority of businesses and how they launch, where they're birthed from, he describes that space as an entrepreneurial seizure. He says people just get a great idea and they go, I'm going to do it. Boom, launched. And then they have a 4-part emotional response. These words, each one is loaded. So guys, you got to listen to these. You go from exhilaration, there's the seizure. I'm going to do it. I did it. We're official. Exhilaration to terror. Oh my gosh, what have I done? To exhaustion, because you start working your behind off to try to scramble and make up for what you didn't do diligence on. And then the fourth one is despair, because, of course, the majority of new businesses fail. And he says a lot of the reason is right at the starting gate, the launch. It wasn't thought through enough. So I think it's very timely and good that we're addressing this topic.
That's good. I'm one of those guys that gets so excited about ideas, and I just want to move the thing forward, and I don't think about all those details naturally. I'm actually thinking back to when I was a kid, and me and my friend, Jeff Tamaro, still a good friend. He's an awesome guy. All we wanted to do was just get on some sort of machine, either a motorcycle or a four-wheeler or a snowmobile. And I remember we bought this street bike to drive on the trails. It was like a 175 Honda. All we wanted to do is get the thing running so we could hop on it and go. And I mean, this thing was in rough shape. It had gas spewing out one of the mufflers. The other muffler was or the other side of the engine was barely working, but it was moving. So we hop on the thing and off we go. Fast forward 20, 30 minutes later, and we're stuck on a trail pushing that thing home because we didn't take the extra time to tune it up and get it ready. And that so reminds me of how I started out when I first launched my business. Let me just get this thing rocking and rolling. And I didn't do that work to really prepare myself. And it left me out on the trail alone, walking home and having to look for solutions. So I love and hate this conversation at the same time because it brings up some pain from my past. Yeah. But I'm also learning a lot about this as we move forward here.
Yeah, this reminds me of that idea of the ready, aim, fire, or so many times as entrepreneurs we're guilty of ready, fire, and then aim. I think a lot of times we can be guilty of that, and we just want to propose that there are 3 steps you can take to help launch and to make sure that you're ready to launch. And number 1 is really know yourself. Know yourself, this idea of self-awareness. Michael, why is self-awareness so critical as you prepare to launch into a new endeavor?
If you don't know yourself, it's more just going by your feelings. I love what you said, McCluskey, about knowing if you're risk averse versus one of these adventurous idea type of guys. Because sometimes you can feel the same intensity of fear as a risk averse person when you are completely prepared and totally ready. And on the other side, you could be so excited and passionate about an idea when you really should be scared and there isn't any fear there. So knowing how you're wired and how you're put together is so crucial. And there's ways to really dig in and figure that stuff out.
I'll take another page from Michael Gerber since he's on my mind right now. I teach from that book so frequently. You got to read the E-Myth. I mean, that's just a beginning primer on entrepreneurism. The E-Myth. Lots of myths about entrepreneurism. And he suggests that in the end, your business will largely be nothing more than an expression of you. Now, it's not built just for you. It's got to be built around the audience that you're trying to reach, the clients you're wanting to serve or the people that will buy your products or whatever. But it's ultimately an expression of you. So whatever things you struggle with personally, those are going to show up in the business in living color. And everybody's going to know that you're struggling with that, not just in the business, but in you personally. So it does make sense that that's the place we should begin. Knowing ourselves, not completely, we can't, but taking a good long look in the mirror and getting to know ourselves maybe better than we have up to this point. Chris, right before we started to record here, you were talking about when you took some of your very first personality assessments for you and then for your team. You got to share some of that.
Yeah, I think this is a big component of knowing yourself. You know, I think the first assessment I took was back around 2009, 2008, and it was simply the strength finders and knowing my strengths, knowing my weaknesses, being aware of those. And that was a couple of years into my first entrepreneurial venture, but I really kind of shelved that. And Chris, this actually circles back to you. Many years later, when I first met you on Dan Miller's cruise, there we are in the Caribbean together. You had brought a lot of your team from PCCI that week. I roomed with one of the faculty. We had many great meals together with all these terrific coaches. And met a guy there, Todd Rogers, on your staff.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, have you ever taken the DISC assessment for you as a leader and for your team? And I said, no. And so it wasn't probably more than a couple months later where myself, my team took that. We rallied around with Todd for a couple hours, and it gave a much better awareness to who I was as a person, but as a leader of my staff. Some of the gaps I had, some of those that there were strengths that they could fill those gaps. And just the way that we communicated became a lot better because we were all more aware of how we were wired. And that started me on a path to more self-awareness, more tests into the Enneagram and others. But I love assessments as a practical tool. What are other practical tools or people in your life that you could use to really know yourself?
You know, I resisted this in the beginning, and this is part of my issue. I thought I knew what people in my life would say about me just because of how they were and how they're different from me. So I didn't bother asking them, what do you think about this idea? What do you think are going to be some of my pitfalls? Or what are some of the red flags that I'm going to run into? Or how does this business fit me? So I think one thing is just asking for feedback, asking for wisdom from people around you who you trust, and being open to really hearing it and not dismissing it. Really reflecting on that and saying, well, is this true about me? Or do I need to be cognizant of that? Or what can I do to prepare so this doesn't become a problem when I do launch?
Absolutely. Talking to those who know you best and asking, inviting, imploring them, please don't let me go out here and just get chewed up in the marketplace. This is what I'm thinking about doing. Can you help me think it through in light of what you know about me or what you think you know about me? I respect your opinion. I hope you will be honest enough with me to affirm me where you can and to challenge me where you think I might trip myself up. Because I'm going to find out soon enough if I do it anyway. I'd rather, forewarned is forearmed. So you know me pretty well. What do you think? So from our wives to our extended family, friends, anybody that we know we can trust, and certainly a coach, hiring somebody to work with you who's not going to just tell you, but who's going to help you in that self-awareness exploration. They're going to pose questions with you that are the questions that need to be answered. You may not know the answers to them immediately, but that coach may direct you to inventories, Chris, like you were talking about. You mentioned the Enneagram, the DISC profile, definitely the Strengths Finder. And, many of our listeners are familiar with the Myers-Briggs personality profile. And there are 360 inventories that can be done in work settings with your superiors, those who are over you, those who are your peers, and those who are your direct reports. You can get a thorough 360 done by a trained coach. So there's no shortage of assessments. It's probably better to not just take a scattershot approach and kind of go online and find a free version of some test and take it like it's one of those self-help tests in a Vogue magazine or GQ or something. Actually get a real viable, psychologically valid and proven instrument and have somebody who is trained in it help you process it. Because again, the business idea that you're pursuing is going to ultimately largely be an expression of nothing more but nothing less than who you are.
Good points to really emphasize there is that you need to know yourself. If your business is going to be a reflection of who you are, know who you are. Invite your spouse, your close friends, those that care about you to give just that bold assessment. Ask them. Don't sugarcoat it. Give it to me straight. I want to know, could I be made for this? What are some blind spots I need to be aware of? So again, that's step number one, know yourself. Step number two is really know the market reality. This venture that you're going into, do you know what the market is like, the customers that you need to reach, the life cycle? How does this play out in our own ventures? Michael, when you talk about getting to coaching and your construction background, all this, how does knowing the market reality play out for you?
Yeah, this one might sound pretty obvious, but I think a lot of folks skip over it. Who is already doing what you want to do? Look around your area, look around at some companies that are in the same business, the same industry, that are doing it well the way that you would want to do business, and connect with them. I mean, oftentimes the feeling is, oh, well, I'm competition, so no one's going to want to talk to me and no one's going to want to give me advice or feedback because I'll be a competitor of theirs. That's actually, I found that to not be true usually. Most high integrity businesses, great businesses that you would want to be like, are very willing to help and be mentors. It actually can be honoring to them for someone to ask them questions, to ask for advice. So try to meet with some folks who are doing what you want to do.
That's good, Michael. Knowing the competition and exploring that, but also knocking on their door and asking them for some advice. Chris, with you and your multiple businesses that you have started, what does this idea of knowing the market reality look like for you?
I hear so frequently in the course I teach, the Successful Coach, just on helping new coaches launch their businesses, a couple of phrases used all the time, and they go basically something like this. One version is, how hard could it be? Okay.
Very.
Everyone would be doing it. Are you actually asking that question, or are you just kind of tossing it to the wind? And so if they're asking that version of the question, well, how hard could it be? I'll just turn it back to them and say, that's a great question. How hard could it be? Where could you go to find out how hard this could be? And the answer is often almost immediately, oh, well, I could probably do some Google searching. I'll bet you there's others out there. Even if I don't risk that they're going to think I'm competition, I could just probably find it in a couple of hours of decent Google searching and really reading through some stuff, listening to some podcasts, following some blogs and social media threads or whatever, you can do some fairly decent armchair research and really chase down an answer to an otherwise garbage can kind of question, like, oh, how hard could it be? We're just going to go. We're going to have our entrepreneurial seizure. The other version that I often hear, because we work with so many people in the Christian market, because PCCI, Professional Christian Coaching Institute, our students are Christian, is that they will Christianize the question. They'll kind of put a little bumper sticker on it. It's like, well, I was praying the other day, and I just really felt like God told me to, and then fill in the blank, whatever it is. That I guess the thing came down from the mountain on a scroll or something to them, and they think, and then they just like charge ahead with that, as if God literally did give them in an audible voice, or a flaming scroll from an angel, like, a directive. That doesn't usually happen. But if you state that out loud and you begin to, in that Christianese kind of way, just go about it as if that is in fact the reality. You don't need to do any more using of the brain God gave you. You're probably setting yourself up for a really rude awakening and maybe a, quote, faith crisis, because I think that's kind of a cheap grace, a cheap faith kind of an approach. You're really excusing yourself through your religion for some work that God's probably saying, no, you got some work to do here. It's not going to kill you, but you got some questions to chase some answers down to.
By the way, if you get a flaming scroll or someone's talking to you from the heavenly realms, please contact us right away. We want to talk to you. You're a modern day Moses.
Yeah, it could happen. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. It rarely happens.
Right.
What that usually looks like is those that claim, what is it, Philippians 4:13? Well, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, so I can do this too. Right?
There you go. A very, very famous, prominent, very influential Christian leader not too many years ago, maybe a decade, had a phrase that he would spout at any moment's notice, and that was, attempt something so big that unless God shows up in a miraculous way, it can't help but fail. Well, guess what happened? He attempted something so big that unless God showed up in a miraculous way, which apparently in his theology didn't happen, it failed colossally. And so many lives were hurt as a result. It was such an embarrassment, such a blight. And it really began with an unwillingness to do exactly what we're challenging people to do here, to look at the market, to crunch the numbers, assess yourself first, and then crunch the numbers. And then I guess we're going to get to number 3 here. But yeah, this is kind of hard sometimes for us to talk about, but I'm really glad we're laying it on the line here.
Yeah. This idea, number 2 of knowing your market reality, it reminds me of my first venture. And Chris, you said it earlier, but it really is as easy as just going to Google and looking at some stuff. I think this will date me a little bit, but I probably used like Netscape or Yahoo at the time to just look at, okay, in this idea of mission travel, how many other online travel agencies are there out there serving this particular type of demographic and this customer? To Michael's point, I actually did reach out to a couple of competitors to say, what's this like? Who are some of your type of customers? And what's their process like? And literally just spending time at Barnes & Noble and on the computer doing research for a while to understand that market reality. But this is a point to not jump over, to not avoid, is you need to know your market. Know it well before you launch out into some big thing. And then Chris, you mentioned it, number 3 here is know the numbers. In particular, know your number. Now, what does this look like for a guy who wants to just go out there and charge the mountain and leave the job, go into his own entrepreneurial endeavor, but not really understanding what is the monthly nut that I need to crack?
Nehemiah, why are you talking to me directly?
I'm talking to all of us on the screen here.
Yeah, right. I know you're looking at me. Yeah. What does that look like? It looks like not doing research, not knowing yourself, and not knowing your number, and running into enemy fire from the front lines. That's what it looks like. But yeah, I learned the hard way for sure. But, when I first heard this number conversation, it was in the coaching industry. And Dan Miller shared this statistic. I'm not going to get it right exactly, but I think it's 95% of coaches make $40,000 a year or less. And So I'm thinking, okay, there's 5% that make more than 40,000. I'm going to be one of those 5%. And no, I don't have any of the training. No, I don't have any of the skills and the expertise yet, but that's going to be
how
me.
hard could it be?
Exactly.
You're like, so you're telling me there's a chance?
What's all that 1 in a million talk? Yeah, and that's literally what happened to me. I was making less than 40,000 a year as a coach when I first started. And yes, I was, how does Michael Gerber put it? I was first.
Yeah, exhilaration to terror.
Right. Terror was certainly what was happening because I was newly married and working on a family at the same time. So that's what that looks like if you don't do what you need to do.
Well, and this is painful for all of us. And I have had my own pain in it as well, that looking at the numbers, it's funny what the numbers look like before you're holding your first child and what they suddenly look like. And you're still in your mind after you've got that child in your arms, or baby number 2 or baby number 3, or the decision that your wife's going to stay home full time now and not generate any extra income. Your number changes depending on life circumstances and seasons and all. But I'll tell you that at one particular juncture in our lives, there was a point where I knew it was time for me to make a radical move with our family. We had baby number 4 on the way. We have 7 now, but this was when we had 3 and number 4 was on the way that we recognized we really were loving homeschooling. We loved the idea of being in the country out of a kind of a metropolitan suburb area. And we loved the idea of me being able to work at home. Well, you put those 3 together and it's like, oh my gosh, this coaching thing looks great. So we were ready to go into it, dive in with both feet. I did relatively know myself decently. I was a psychotherapist and had been in practice for a dozen years by that point. So I knew myself decently and I knew some of the market realities. I hired my first coach after doing my research. Actually, Chris, going back to your Yahoo search, what else was it you said you used?
Netscape.
Netscape. Okay, I researched on Alta Vista.
I remember Alta Vista.
Do you remember Alta Vista?
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, there was nothing to find, right? Amazon didn't even exist back then. But I did what research I could. I read some
CD that came in the mail too.
Right. Yeah, I got some books, and I went to my pastor actually and explained to him what I was looking at doing, and had somebody from the board of trustees who was willing to meet with me. But the point is that I knew myself, I did some market research, and I knew the number that we needed to make, Rachel and I, with baby number 4 on the way, in order to pursue this bigger vision of a lifestyle that translated to a lot more than just a particular paycheck. And so in our case, we actually tightened the belt wherever we could. We did away with a lot of things, including health insurance. A lot of people say that's suicide. Once baby number 4 was born and we got through the baby well checkups, we dropped health insurance for almost 2 years. It was a big, scary step. We got a catastrophic policy in place, but otherwise, we sold our home, bought a trailer, a single-wide mobile home trailer. We sold both of our vehicles and bought one used minivan, the Ford Humiliation.
Yes, I love it.
That's true. But that was because we had a fairly small number in that season that both of us, husband and wife, were saying, you know what, if we could just make that a very specific number and live in this place and have me at home and have this other flexibility, that would be sufficient for then. And then, like most things, of course, you build on something that's already working, you do more of it, and you can expand it. But sometimes the nut's not very big.
Yeah, that's a good point about the seasons. So that is something that I did not consider. And part of the reason why I struggled so much is not having awareness of what season I was in and what's coming up for me. When these kids start showing up, there's all kinds of other expenses and dynamics that affect what your number is going to be. Love that story, McCluskey.
Yeah, that's really true, though. And understanding those seasons is, yeah, diapers, they cost some money. You have more mouths to feed. This is going to continue to get more expensive. So it is. Knowing the season you're in, I think, is especially valuable. Also knowing as you're coming, especially from an employee mindset to an entrepreneur's mindset, and just the reality of how you get paid is a lot different. So from an employee perspective, you have actually probably a lot more taxes taken out of that initial paycheck that sounds like it's a big number then when you get to be an entrepreneur and you've got your own business and you have these things called expenses and things that you can write off, that number can look a lot different. So this really is a step. Knowing your numbers is kind of where you have to do the hard work, guys. You have to sit down there with that pen and paper and go through the credit card statements, your bank statements, understand and get some kind of a process in place to track those numbers. You know, we've talked about YNAB on here before, or Mint, or other software programs where you can track all of your spending and know, like, what is it that's going out, and where, like Chris said, where can I cut some of this excess that we don't really need in this season of life if we really want to get to this new phase of launching our own venture, being a true EFM family. What's that nut going to look like? It could be a lot less than we think.
Yeah. You know, there's another thing that can affect what that number is too. And it's, what does your current position look like? Are you dying? Are you in pain? Is it so excruciating just to get in your car and go to work that if you do it for another couple months that you're going to lose your mind if you go in another day? If that's you, your number might be a little lower. That you might be looking for a free yourself from a bad situation type of number. But if you're okay, like if your job is decent, you like it okay, but you have this interest in going into business, you can your number might be a little bit higher. Maybe you have some time to build in some more margin, some more buffer, so that transition is a little easier.
That's a good point, Michael, in terms of knowing this free yourself number, as you mentioned. I think that's a very valid point to make. And then also it gets back to something we spoke about earlier in this risk tolerance. You know, part of this is, as you're making this plan to embark on this new venture, is understanding, as you're budgeting, what kind of an emergency fund might you need. Give yourself that runway. Give yourself that cushion, so that as you embark on this entrepreneurial journey, Chris, you mentioned earlier, there are these stages, there are these roller coasters, and sometimes the funds also track that roller coaster. You need to be aware of what could or could not happen and have that emergency fund in place as well.
That's a really good point. You know, I should put that piece into that number crunching that we did, because I said we were willing to tighten the belt everywhere we could, but some of that was clearly choice. We could have done other things. We sold our home down in Florida and made about $40,000 off of it. We chose instead to keep that cash liquid. So I put about $20,000 of it just into the bank, and I literally had, for a period of time here on the farm, I had either $10,000 or maybe it was $20,000 in cash. We kept it in a bag of diapers. We figured nobody probably looked in there. It was, and we paid everything that we really had to pay in cash. We just did the envelope system, you know, make yourself really be aware of what's going out. Does it need to, you know, the cash is getting a little lower. We forced ourselves on that. So there was some runway, there was a cushion, and yet you want to put some guardrails in place to help yourself be very cautious, very prudent as it goes out. Because, yeah, the launch is up and down and up and down. It just is. Never seen one that wasn't.
Man, if every time we opened a diaper there was cash in it, the three of us on this screen would be wealthy men, right?
The number of kids in diapers on the screen is a big number.
That's right.
So what about you? Where are you in this journey? Seeking out this new venture, being ready to launch. Of these steps that we mentioned, knowing yourself, knowing the market reality, knowing your number, where do you need to focus today to help you launch?
Thank you for listening to the Entrepreneurial Family Man Podcast. Visit efmlife.com to connect with us and others like you who are pursuing success in enterprise, family, and marriage.